So this is the first edition of the Khoodeelaar campaign. Khoodeelaar campaign. It's a Siloti word. Silhat, Silot. The original pronunciation is Silot. So it's a Siloti word, Khoodeelaar, and it is a word that I created as part of the campaign against big business agenda fronted by Crossrail, plotting to attack the East End of London. And the plot was defeated by the campaign that we maintained for 8 years. And this is the Khoodeelaar campaign, which is applied across the board and extrapolated to cover all the evidence similar to the evidence on the behavior of big business and their operatives and stooges and agents in lying to the community that had been targeted for attack. Now, today's newspapers in Fleet Street kind of give it sample. It's a sample, constitute a sample of the details of the agenda that and the narrative that drive the operations of these propaganda organs. As anyone familiar with the publications of the Khoodeelaar campaign and my opinion about the abilities and skills and fitness for, quote, leadership, campaigning, and moral kind of constitution of Jeremy Corbyn would know, I never thought on the evidence, strictly on the evidence, that Jeremy Corbyn had the necessary materials, the intellectual materials and the contents to justify being in the post of leader of the Labour Party or of any party, and that Jeremy Corbyn not only lacked the abilities and the intellectual capacities, he also lacked the basic common sense. He never kind of recognized anything as being worthwhile and as worthy or deserving of his following and adopting if it didn't come from a white person. So for him to be suspended by the Starmer-fronted cabal on the allegation that he, Corbyn, was centrally involved in the anti-Semitic, that is anti-Jewish kind of behavior of many Labour Party members and supporters. That actually illustrates the point that we have been making for years. That Corbyn is not in possession of the intellectual abilities to lead the party. And secondly, that Corbyn is a racist. Corbyn is a racist, whether he understands his racism is not the issue. The issue is that his behavior shows that he's a racist. And we don't talk about him being racist only because there is a report from the corrupt outfit called the Equalities and Human Rights Contraption. That corrupt outfit was created by Hetty Herman and Tony Blair. And in the creation of that corrupt, racist outfit, they used the official mental slave Trevor Terrible Phillips, who was used to dismantle the Commission for Racist Enslavement. Now, he is a worse mental slave than the Commission for Racist Enslavement and its personnel were. So what you are looking at is an exclusive on every level. The worldwide exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street is containing all the elements and facts that you will not find anywhere in any single outlet, mainstream or otherwise in Britain, or in all of them put together. Well, this is the kind of tone of the headlines and the kind of running stories that are running, notes that are running across the media, in the mainstream so-called media. And this is based on ignorance. While Corbyn is unfit intellectually, has been unfit and has been a racist in the sense of being ignorant and stupid, ill-informed, uneducated, ill-educated about racism. The others, the media that call him the kind of anti-Semite, are as racist and as stupid. And that, of course, includes the Murdoch, Dirty Digger Murdoch Times. We shall be talking about those, all of those, collectively and individually during today and in the near future, because this is something that is going to go on being relevant. Now, here is a piece about this German, so Russian named German tennis player, kind of being estranged from his latest girlfriend or his ex-girlfriend that is carrying his baby, who says that she will not share the child with him or custody with him. And the other is the woman, the Russian woman, whose name is very similar to Sharapova. Now, she is claiming that he nearly strangled her to death in the hotel room, and she left. She ran away in her bare feet and was standing in the streets of New York Street trying to get help. So this is the reason why I'm citing this one or showing this one is to dispel the myth surrounding celebs and sports kind of personalities, that so many of them are being given pride of platform, or pride of kind of prominence in the public platforms and the media platforms, solely because of their position as sportswoman or sportman. And regardless of their character. And the point about that particular incident is that many sports persons celebrities are literally psychopaths. But the corrupt media, mainstream media, Fleet Street, has got a vested interest in protecting and shielding these psychopaths. And that actually is extremely evident or exhibited in the fact that Jimmy Savile, the serial kind of sexual abuser and sex attacker and violent sex attacker, it is impossible that the Fleet Street and the mainstream media didn't know about Jimmy Savile while he was at it for as long as he was. And the reason why they actually allowed him to carry on abusing the targets and victims of his attacks is not far from the fact that they needed that criminal protected from the serious devastation that he would suffer, and they would suffer as well, because all the media, mainstream, Fleet Street, gave ready platform to Jimmy Savile for decades, very long time, very long time. So that shows that there were either these organs, the media, Fleet Street, were edited or misedited by absolute morons or absolute criminals. And the behavior of the likes of Kelvin Mackenzie, I think is the spelling, who was the worst ranging controller of the Dirty Diggers scum, this one, for too long. Evidence of his behavior shows that these are serious criminals and that Fleet Street is harboring, sheltering, shielding, giving platforms to serial criminals and racists. Now, so therefore, how is it that this same Fleet Street is all over the place with the moral height of condemnation against Corbyn? Because as I have said, the Equality and Human Rights Commission is a criminally confected conspiracy that was created as a continuation of the conspiracy called the Commission for Racist Enslavement. Now, in April 1977, when the Commission for Racist Enslavement was launched by a press conference held in the vicinity of the literal Fleet Street, I asked the question of the launch chairman, who was an ex-conservative MP, a man called David Lane. Now, David Lane was an ex-conservative racist who was appointed by the racist Labour Prime Minister James Callaghan to chair this CRE, Commission for Racial Equality, which I promptly found on the evidence to be engaged as the Commission of Racist Enslavement. So I asked a number of questions of David Lane, and Lane never could answer. He didn't answer and he could not answer. And my questions to the successive chairs of the Commission for Racist Enslavement continued. That was starting in April 1977. And today, what is it now? It is 77, 87, 97, 2007, 17. So it's 43 years since the Commission for Racist Enslavement was confected. And it was one of the obstructions to racism being opposed, identified, and ended, let alone ended. And my question always is prompted by the standards of universal, ethical, objective evidence. And I was asking that question, or that series of questions, of David Lane in order to establish whether he understood the need to oppose racism in Britain and whether he connected such a need with the role of the outfit CRE, Commission for Racial Equality, that he was announced as the chair of. David Lane couldn't understand, couldn't reply. And as I said in the last 2 minutes or 3 minutes, none of the others who succeeded him after he finished being the chair could understand or answer the question. Any question that I ever had. And the most notorious, poisonous, corrupt, racist moron who was the chair of the CRE was a man called Peter Newsom. Now, Newsom had been before that the education officer at the Inner London Education Authority. So by the time I got hold of Peter Newsom at the CRE, it became quite clear that Newsom physically had given orders to the staff at the reception to stop me entering the building to attend any of the press conferences because I was running a number of print and print-related outfits. At the time, we are talking about decades before the internet, or the internet became public, that is. And my weekly publication at that time was called in Bangla language, it was called, in English it meant rights, Odhikar. And Newsom totally failed to understand any of the questions, and let alone, in fact, he made it worse. He made his stupidity worse by kind of behaving in the racist reflex way that all racists do behave. He gave the orders to the security person at the entrance to the CRE near the Victoria Station in London. And I knew that that was based on an order because the security person had no kind of agenda, personal agenda to stop me. And Newsom had known that previously, in the previous kind of events that I attended, along with about 20 to 30 others, many of whom were from so-called ethnic newspapers and ethnic outlets. And they were there as stooges, ethnic surrogates, and themselves, in their own forms, intellectually deficient. So they were not kind of echoing the questions that I asked, nor were they impressed by the fact that I was keen to ask questions at events that were supposed to be for the purpose of extracting information. So all the ethnic surrogates colluded with the Commission for Racist Enslavement regime, which is why I called it Commission for Racist Enslavement. And so Newsom decided that rather than being, on his part, being exposed by me as being stupid, by not being able to answer my questions, he would prefer not to have me get the opportunity to ask questions so that my questions would go unanswered because he couldn't understand or deal with my questions. So that was many years, in fact, more than 10 years before he confessed. And this racist, Peter Newsom, confessed that he did order a decade or so earlier than when he was admitting it. A decade earlier, he confessed to giving orders to the CRE staff to block my entrance to the CRE building. And he made the confession to the Guardian. The racist Guardian, which is one of the outlets today celebrating the kind of publication of the Equality and Human Rights Commission's stupidity. And this Guardian's racist woman, now the health editor, called Sarah Bosley, she spoke to me at the beginning of March 1992. And I gave her the facts, but she published a twisted piece about that. And she contradicted herself about 10 times in a piece that is only a quarter of a page long. It's a profile of me called The Angry Messiah of E1. E1, that is London East 1. Now, I was not posing as a messiah whatsoever, but they wanted, the Fleet Street wanted me to be given that tag, a messiah, because they couldn't understand why I had such extensive knowledge of their criminality and stupidity and immorality, and why I was so morally committed to opposing that. So I'll deal with the Sarah Bosley idiocy. What I'm saying here is this part of the Equality and Human Rights Commission's idiotic report that the entirety of Fleet Street is celebrating today. And the celebration has been tagged on to the kind of suspension of Jeremy Corbyn from the Labour Party. Now, nobody, as I said at the beginning, nobody, either in Fleet Street or anywhere else in the UK, would have the information, evidential information, that I'm sharing in this broadcast about today's Fleet Street as part of the exclusive, world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. And this is a racist Fleet Street. Now, Sarah Bosley is clueless, as I shall be demonstrating when I do the piece on her. But back to the point about the Equality and Human Rights Commission, if they existed, they never were set up to oppose racism. They were set up by Hattie Harman, who used her official racist mental slave Trevor Terrible Phillips to confect that outfit as a diversion, as a denier of opponents of racism. Now, the absolutely fundamental question about anti-Semitism being the focus of this inquiry is this: are they, objectively speaking, which they are not, but are they notionally, theoretically, let's say, asking questions about the Labour Party leadership's role on opposing racism or on reinforcing racism? What are they doing? This is being broadcast, what time is it now? 14:37 GMT on Friday, the 30th of October 2020, the day after the corrupt, racist outfit, Equality and Human Rights Commission published their report, and the Fleet Street and the mainstream media, so-called in Britain, in London, are having the biggest celebration since Boris Johnson was found to have completely ceased to exist. whenever that was. Now they are celebrating this for two reasons. One is there is give them the most eagerly desired diversion from Boris Johnson's failures, the Conservatives lying and cruelty and all the rest of it. And secondly, it gives them the excuse to have a go at anyone who supports the people of Palestine. Because the evidence of behavior by the Labour Party, either as a parliamentary formation or based on the behavior of the Labour Party MPs outside the parliament, and this applies to Labour Party card-carrying members of the councils and holders of positions as elected mayors, so-called. Combined together, the evidence of all of these people shows that they are complicit with racism, that they are complicit with anti-Muslim racism as aggravated. So there are three different groupings of targets of racism in this country today. One is the people of African and Asian background, regardless of their faith or their religion or culture. And the other, which is the bigger one, the Muslims who come from both Asia and Africa, but mainly from Asia. And the third is anyone who is not from those two continents, but is also subject to and treated as targets of racism. And in none of these kind of groupings is there any evidence that Corbyn bothered about protecting their human rights and their rights against being racistly attacked. So Corbyn has been guilty of racism against all these people because he has allowed and is still allowing today, the day after the Equality and Human Rights Confection published its so-called report. Today, most of the automatic kind of bots and inventions that pretend to be or they are operated or handled as Corbyn supporters, they are all over the place and they are collected. All of their reasons against Corbyn being suspended do not amount to anything. Because Corbyn is not only intellectually deficient, his supporters are intellectually deficient as well, regardless of the particular ethnicity or race or racial grouping or characteristics. As I have said, Corbyn did a runner. Every time he faced a crew of media people waiting for him outside his house in Islington, Corbyn looked for an excuse to do a runner away from them instead of addressing them, far less addressing their topical, temporal questions of the day. So Corbyn is not somebody who is known to practice discourse or debate. Now, how on earth did the morons who decided that Corbyn would be the leader of the Labour Party to oppose the Conservatives, how did they work that out? What basis? Because Corbyn, in the decades before he was kind of put in the position as a candidate for Labour leader, had been a member of parliament, repeatedly getting elected on false pretenses. Because all the promises that Corbyn made to his electors or his quote supporters or backers were bogus. Corbyn never, ever made a difference in the House of Commons with his debate, with his strategy, anything. And I suffered strictly for collecting evidence. Many incidents that I witnessed where Corbyn was present. And Corbyn was present in some of the events that I attended or observed for evidence purposes, while Tony Benn was still alive and active. And at none of these events had I any witness or witnessed any incident that either featured Jeremy Corbyn or Ken lying still Livingstone or any of their cabal of the so-called left speaking by addressing the paramount needs of this society, which is to make the society non-racist, tolerant, and fair. These are cabals and cliques, and they remain so today. I'm talking now back in the 1980s. In fact, starting from May 1981, when the Labour Party, as led by Andrew McIntosh, was actually successful in getting the election, the GLC, Greater London Council election of 1981, and it got the Tories out. Tories were led by Horace Cutler. So I started witnessing these morons from 1981, May 1981, because the election of the Labour Party to form the Greater London Council control group was followed by euphoric announcements and activities cited and staged at the County Hall, which is still there, but it's not County Hall anymore. County Hall that is situated on the southern bank of the River Thames, generally opposite the Palace of Westminster. So those who don't know London, this is the location. The only gap that kind of separates the angular kind of opposition is a bridge, Westminster Bridge. So to the northeast of the Westminster Bridge is the County Hall, and to the southwest of the Westminster Bridge is the Palace of Westminster. So many events took place, therefore, in the County Hall, featuring Tony Benn or featuring one of his followers or whatever. And all of these were stunts and spins and completely empty, bogus kind of parades to create the personality of Ken Livingstone, who had just carried out the coup for leadership of the Greater London Council against Andrew McIntosh, who was dethroned by these coup meisters. And the coup meisters included Ken Livingstone's fellow Labour Party GLC member, John McDonnell, who has just been kind of for 5 years, the main person after Jeremy Corbyn in the leadership of the left of the Labour Party. Now, if you put together all of their utterance in the last 5 years, Corbyn, McDonnell, Livingstone, and Corbyn's supporter, George Galloway, who is no longer a supporter, of course, because Galloway has completely messed up even his kind of rate of stupidity in moving from one detour to another. and has become a kind of enslaved to the longing to be approved of and accepted by the nasty Nigel Farage as one of his disciples. So it has been a long detour for George Galloway. But we are not talking about George Galloway in this context, because Galloway long ceased to be part of the cabal that Jeremy Corbyn surrounded himself with. Whoever they were personally, they lacked, and they still do lack, the intellectual abilities. And they don't have any moral character. And they actually are all, despite the differences individually among them, they are all various degrees of racist, which is why they are lumbered with the accusation that they didn't handle anti-Semitism in their kind of watch, because they don't understand racism. Now, Starmer is being celebrated by the Daily Mirror. And the Daily Mirror is the paper of Robert Maxwell, who stole hundreds of millions of pounds of pension funds, and the Daily Mirror didn't publish anything. And it's the same Daily Mirror who has been bounced into reluctantly publishing stuff about Ghislaine Maxwell, the kind of procurer of young girls for serial sex abusers, including Brenda's son Andrew. So the Mirror has no moral kind of position whatsoever, and yet it is having the display of morality. The only one that is on the front page, not talking about anti-Semitism, the word, but continuing the clown kind of narrative, is the Star, which is calling Jeremy Corbyn another clown as well. Johnson is a clown, as is Boris Johnson, as is Jeremy Corbyn, that is. And the Daily Express of Beaverbrooks calls the report by the Equalities and Disgrace kind of commission as a Labour suspends Corbyn is a day of shame. And the lying Daily Express is inventing, every day it invents a headline completely false. It is saying that the house price sales are going up. How on earth could that be justified by the numbers in the time of pandemic when everything is shut or shutting down? And the same theme, the Daily Boris Graph, they cannot believe their luck, if that is luck. Of course, they have conspired with the creation of the narrative all these 5 years. So they are not just bystanders reporting objectively. They are parties to the kind of civil war that they now celebrate, has plunged the Labour Party. Okay, what is the Financial Times saying, therefore? The Financial Times is saying that there is new pressure on the Johnson regime to introduce UK-wide national lockdown. So there is no big headline in the Financial Times front page about the Labour Party. And they're saying, in fact, what all the racist and right-wingers in the UK and across the world are saying and what wishing to say, that Trump will win the election because of the better performance by the US economy. That is what they're kind of hoping would happen. And it remains an enigma, the American so-called election, the democracy. And this is a wrong headline by the Financial Times, which is saying that this is the Equalities and Human Wrongs Commission report is kind of signaling the ending of a sorry chapter in the history of the Labour Party. That is wrong. That is not factually supportable. That is not factually sustainable, that assertion. Now, this is a cartoon that is more this cartoon on the Financial Times about Marcus Rashford and Johnson being caught in that state. So this article that this cartoon is featuring in is by Philip Stevens. Is it the same one? So Philip Stevens is saying Rashford, the footballer, has a lesson for all politicians. Now, we shall be talking about all of those in due course again, but let's talk about Tower Hamlets, which is where the Khoodeelaar campaign is based in Tower Hamlets, but not limited to defending the community in Tower Hamlets. It is defending the communities across the East End of London and across England and upholding the values that are universal and apply to other parts of the world. And the importance of Tower Hamlets in this context is in terms of topicality. The topic of the Equalities and Human Wrongs Commission's report about the Labour Party carry one participant, at least one participant from Tower Hamlets, current participant, which is one of the two MPs from this area, this borough. And she has been featuring in two types of wrongs in the last 2 days. One is this one, of course, we featured yesterday. She is the MP called Afsana Begum. And she featured in the Sun. This is the Sun, the Murdoch Sun of Thursday, the 29th of October, page 15. She featured in that one based on what the scum says, the Sun says, exclusive report, says that she appeared in court, or she was kind of formally processed in court the previous day after she had been charged with 3 counts of fraud. That was yesterday. But today's news, again available yesterday to all, referred to her as an ally of Jeremy Corbyn's. Not only that, they also say that she had called Tony Biliar. She didn't call him Biliar. Biliar is the name that our campaign, our movement has given to Tony Biliar since late 1997. because we noticed the linguistic kind of fraud that Bilayar was indulging in. Of course, Bilayar was not a known quantity until he became leader of the Labour Party. And so therefore we had no real kind of evidence, substantial kind of evidence of any contribution to linguistics or discourse in society coming from Tony Bilayar until 1997, following the election of May 1997. But this Afsana Begum, one of the two MPs from Tower Hamlets constituencies, is being included in the report by the Equalities and Human Wrongs Commission as having once called Tony Bilayar a Zionist kind of agent or something like that. I mean, being aged 30 means that Afsana Begum wasn't born until early 1990s or late 1980s. So therefore, her actual empirical kind of connection with the society in Tower Hamlets is not possible to be commenced until the start of this century, when she would have been 10 or 11. So therefore, she would not have known anything much about Tony Bilayar. So whoever she was kind of echoing in her alleged social media kind of description of Bilayar as an agent of the Zionists would have been somebody else, not herself. That is kind of giving her the benefit of the doubt and saying that she could not have been the author of that, whatever it was that she allegedly published against Tony Bilayar or against alleged Zionists. But the decision between, let's say, 2014 or between 2013 and 2015 or 2014, whenever the actual date was that she got the allocation for a flat on the Isle of Dogs, could not have been made without her full active participation and involvement. This is not to say that she will not kind of continue to claim that she was innocent. The point is, she could be innocent on the evidence if there exists. But this is a kind of issue that is not just about her kind of own natural propensity to claim to be innocent. It is a matter of the duties of the council, the local Tower Hamlets Council, whether acting directly or acting through agents meaning housing associations that it actually uses as its agency, which is what is relevant in this case. If Afsana Begum got a nomination from the council to be provided housing by any of the several organizations that serve as the agents of the local Tower Hamlets Council, if she got that nomination from Tower Hamlets Council in her favor, then that would be the issue at the center of how she got that. Because as has been publicly pointed out, the kind of category of emergency housing needs that she fell in was not one that warranted any priority being given to her, as against the needs of thousands of people whose identities have not been published, but theoretically who must exist or must have existed along with her kind of contacts with whoever she got the nomination from. And that is something that needs to be published. And they won't be published in the proceedings because the nature of the proceedings, the nature of the charging are such the details of other people's housing needs and applications are not going to become part of the evidence. And that has to be the task of this organization. Evidentially, we shall be diagnosing the housing corruption or the corruption in housing at every stage that goes on in Tower Hamlets through all the organizations that are publicly funded, including the Tower Hamlets Council. And in considering that line, that kind of series of connections and components and the chains in the lines of corruption and denial of due service, those who feature are the mayor, the chief executive, and anyone at any point who is in place in the name of dealing with housing needs of the people. Now, evidence we have is that the mayor in place in Tower Hamlets, current mayor John Biggs, is a liar, as was Lutfur Rahman, who was ousted on the 23rd of April 2015, and who a month later or 6 weeks later replaced by John Biggs. So Lutfur Rahman was a liar for the entire period of his time in that post. And Biggs has been a liar the entire period since he has been in post. First elected on 11th of June 2015, first time after Lutfur was ousted. And then again on the 3rd of May 2018. Whatever the date or dates of the election, John Biggs has been a liar. What is his motivation? John Biggs's motivation have been racist, jealousy, and criminality, and lack of security. And Lutfur Rahman has been a jealous liar who was lying in accordance with the agenda set for him by a gang of criminals operating as Muslim, kind of motivated Muslims, and other criminals in Tower Hamlets with whom Lutfur Rahman was in collusion and was in a complicit relationship. Now, the fact that only a very small number of convictions for housing fraud have been secured is not representative at all of the extent of corruption and housing fraud that actually go on in Tower Hamlets, have gone on in Tower Hamlets for a very long time. In fact, right throughout the years when the local council has had any responsibility for housing people. Housing in effect has been treated as part of a kind of social security or welfare. And in fact, the existence of the housing benefit proves that housing has been treated as part of social security and welfare. Now, these are issues that make a very serious difference to the lives of people and livelihoods of people affected by the urgencies and emergencies of housing. So every single issue, every single decision, whether to accept somebody as eligible to be allocated housing or whether to allocate somebody to the particular kind of property, these are life-changing kind of decisions. They could ruin somebody's life or they could save somebody's life. So the question is, was Afsana Begum able to jump the queue, which is the headline in the Sun, jumped 18,000 flat queue. That is to say, she jumped the queue. How did she jump the queue? That is the question, and the question is answered by the fact that she was connected. Even if the election of Alibor Chowdhury as a councillor and that of Lutfur Rahman as elected mayor in May 2014, even if those elections were declared completely nullified by Richard Morey, the election commissioner, in his ruling on the 23rd of April 2015, there remained enough councillors who were allied to Lutfur Rahman, and they remained in place until the May election of 2018. And Afsana Begum knew all of them, or most of them, and she had close working relationship with more than one of the remaining ones. So the question is, did her jumping the queue include any kind of relationship with any of those who held positions, executive positions, if you like, in the housing duties of the council? And if so, will those be examined in court? It is not possible to say at this stage because we have not seen any published details of the case made against her by the prosecutors. But suffice to say that the fact that anyone, either Afsana Begum, what happens to her, whether she gets convicted and sentenced to jail or not, or she gets away, doesn't matter in the consideration of the cases already known. And the cases known include the cases of three councillors. Three councillors, one is Akhtar, one is Ali, and one is Harun. These three councillors were all found guilty and convicted of housing fraud, and all of them have been jailed, whatever the terms of their jailing. And the fact that they were kind of able to be prosecuted in the context of the reality of Tower Hamlets as a borough, as a council, and as having organizations like the housing associations, it is actually not an achievement for the society generally. It's a damnation of the society and the community, and it is a defeat for the community in Tower Hamlets, for the electors in Tower Hamlets, and it's a loss For most people who have been in severe, objectively, universally definable housing needs and have been denied housing allocation by the serial criminals who made decisions about their housing by abusing the positions in the council. That is, the ones who denied the people the housing services, the council employees and others who have been involved in that denial. And in the case that we have examined, and we have consistent, running, continuing, evidential, narrative, and chains of evidence and proof on Lutfur Rahman lied for 5 years or 6 years, as did Alibor Chaudhry. So Alibor Chaudhry was the liar who was not in need of lying, but he did lie. Because he thought, Alibor Chaudhry did, that if he lied to me, to the campaign, to the community, through me and our campaign, then that would be less harmful to his career than if he told the truth and refused to lie for Lutfur Rahman. Because Alibor Chaudhry was given to believe that Lutfur Rahman was there permanently secure in the position of mayor. And Alibor Chaudhry's career, future prospects depended on Lutfur Rahman's security of tenure as the mayor in post. Alibor Chaudhry was wrong every time, because I told him that every time he lied to me or made misleading statements on behalf of Lutfur Rahman, he was doing damage. Damage to the community, damage to the dignity of his own self. And he was doing irreparable damage to the cause of humanity, which, whether Alibor Chaudhry understood that or not, is not something that can be verified, because Alibor Chaudhry always maintained a stance that he was telling the truth. He wasn't. Because although he said he was telling the truth, he said that in 2012, he said that in 2011, he said that in 2012, he said that in 2013, 14, 15. So he said that for 5 years, that he was telling the truth about what Lutfur Rahman was thinking, what Lutfur Rahman was doing. It is only after 2015 that Alibor Chaudhry kind of let slip, as if accidentally, in an unplanned conversation with me in Brick Lane, and he confessed. He confessed essentially to the very thing that I had said for 5 years, that he was lying to me. Now, Alibor Chaudhry was the person that was given the most amount of burden to carry the message of Lutfur Rahman to the rest of the council, to the rest of the community. And as Nick Cohen, he doesn't recognize my work, but I do recognize his work based on evidence. Nick Cohen said in his article about Lutfur Rahman in The Spectator that Lutfur Rahman is sly. Now, in the Siloti vernacular, in the Sileti language, in the Sileti colloquial, that would be the nearest word that in Siloti would express that sly, would be fungafua. That is what Nick Cohen called him in English, but that is what in Siloti would be the word that would fit Lutfur Rahman's behavior as described by Nick Cohen. As being sly, Lutfur Rahman didn't want to make untruthful statements to other people. He gave Alibor Chaudhry that task to lie for him. And Alibor did lie for him. I have no agenda against either of them. I mean, I have no agenda even against John Biggs. I have no agenda against anyone in terms of their personal human rights. I don't want to damage their personal human rights. I don't want to damage their personal human kind of entitlements, universally understood. But that is not the same thing as their behavior, their roles. If I told Alibor Chaudhry over 5 years that I knew more than he did, there is no evidence on which Alibor Chaudhry could substantiate any reason to oppose my assertion that I knew more than he did. It's not because of my name that I knew more than he did, nor of my age or whatever. It is simply the evidence that I had gone through and I had seen and I checked. And the evidence right across the Bahrain Tower hamlets and beyond pointed to the facts that Alibor was misrepresenting the evidence on the ground. And the reason why he was doing so was because he had been told by Lutfur Rahman to do that. Alibor didn't want to tell lies. I have no reason to believe that Alibor intended to tell lies to me. But I have to point out that what he did tell me at the behest of Lutfur Rahman was always a lie. Now, why did he do that? I told Lutfur in front of Alibor on the 20th of September 2012 that Lutfur was in grave danger if he didn't take my advice. Alibor saw that. Zubair from Channel S saw that, heard that. And everything I said to Lutfur on that date and since has come true. And they all lied. Lutfur Rahman lied. Zubair lied. Alibor lied. Why did they lie? So therefore, when Afsana Begum says that she would vigorously defend herself against allegations, that cannot be her words. Somebody must have put the words into her statement, or these solicitors, whoever. It is not acceptable for a single Bar Council in London to become prone to persistent incidents of corruption that are known. The incidents of the known corruption are far smaller than the incidents of the unknown corruptions that go on.